How nice to see you.
It's good to see you again, Madam Chair, and to my colleagues who heard from me for 2 hours earlier today on other bills, with also for those testifying. I do want to beg the indulgence, I say, of the committee with the few who are sitting here. I'm sorry I bought the pizza because I think everyone should come back in. The bill that I have before you today, House Bill 596, deals with IEPs, Individualized Education Plans, and this is for special education students. And what I would start by saying, you all have my written testimony. I think I tend to give fairly brief testimony, and today I have a little story to tell, so it may take a few extra minutes. But I want to walk people through the process of what happened with this bill over the last year or two, the issue, and then the bill. And this, too, is for those behind me, most of whom have heard about the changes that I've been suggesting in my own legislation. 2 years ago, Senator Harrington and I put in legislation that passed that created the 5-day rule that's under consideration here. And at the time, the idea was so for people to understand with IEPs, it can be a very arduous process. Federal law requires schools and parents to work together on things. We learned 2 years ago, as the educators in the room probably already knew, that the IEP process doesn't always work as it's written to work, and that there can be some issues. And so the bill we passed 2 years ago was to make sure that parents get this pile of potentially hard to understand or difficult language or all of this information 5 days in advance, so they could be more informed in their decision making, have time to absorb that information, call or talk to friends in the field or others, look on the web, do whatever it took to understand the information coming to them. And we heard from practitioners at the time that this would create an added burden to what are already some very strict guidelines. And so we passed the bill 2 years ago. I was immediately approached by someone I know back home who said, this is a real burden. I said, come back to me next year. Let's see what happens during the school year and see what the experiences are. And then he and I got back together, along with some other professionals, on trying to find a little bit of relief on the professional side of getting these IEPs done on time. And what I would say is, over the last few weeks, in constant consultation with with parents, with teachers, with other professionals, with the State Department of Education, this bill and its amendments have gone through quite a few iterations. And I know that many of our colleagues here were receiving a lot of letters from parents about the issue, and I think you all would have gotten my letter from a couple of weeks ago saying, no, don't worry about it, we're not doing the bill that way, we're doing it this way. Well, what I have to tell you is we're even going another route once again. So again, I apologize for that. So in talking about that history, and I'm jumping down in my own testimony, the idea of giving parents the advance notice, while there was some opposition to that 2 years ago, every professional I've spoken to since has said it is a great idea. It is the right thing to do. Parents should have this information in advance. And so for all the fight back then, people say, yes, it's the right thing to do. But what happened was, in the bill that we did 2 years ago, we thought we had put some safeguards into the law that have proven to be quite rigid, just not enough flexibility. And some of the intent we had on some of the definitions and what we expected out of the technical assistance didn't always happen. And we've been working with the State Department of Education on that to change that from here on out. And that's what this bill, as now amended, would do. And the letter that many of you would have received from my office a couple weeks ago was saying that half of the pressure of what I heard from school professionals was that to get information to parents 5 business days in advance is particularly difficult after long holidays. Thanksgiving, the winter break, spring break, and that a meeting that might be scheduled on January 6th would mean something would be mailed on December 22nd or even earlier in December. So this very tight window in which they have 60 to 90 days to do the important part of the job, the assessment and the interactions with the children and all the things that should be happening, and we were taking some of that time, even more time away for the report. So my letter a couple of weeks ago suggested we would try to change that part. I've since learned we can't do that in terms of the federal law. But I do want to focus now on where the technical assistance fell apart and the amendments that I can provide to the committee on what we're trying to change. a few other things that we learned, and the changes that I'm recommending would only impact the side of the school professionals, the teachers, the guidance counselors, the school psychologists, the speech therapists, and others, the pupil personnel workers. And this would really have no impact on the parents, but the process would be smoother for those professionals. At the time, back in 2010, we were purposefully vague on how the IEP would be delivered to the parents. And we've discovered since then is that many school districts have said it can only be mailed. And if it's going to be mailed, we need it 10 days in advance so we can copy, compile, staple, do what we have to do, and get everything out. And they were worried about that timing. It could be emailed. Some people had concerns that that would be illegal for confidentiality reasons. It is fully legal. Now you would say, well, not every parent in the state has email. That is correct. But what we're saying here is about the flexibility. It could be emailed. We'll use someone in the room. Let's say young Mark had an IEP. We'll refer to Delegate Fisher here. And then Delegate Lutke, who's a teacher, was his teacher. Delegate Lutke knows if I can get this home by putting this in young Mark's backpack and he'll take it home. Or, conversely, I know that if I put it in young Mark's backpack to go home, he's tossing it in the lake. Well, you know what teachers know? They know their students, and in most cases, and our school professionals are in constant contact with parents, they know these things. They have these conversations already by email or by phone in a lot of cases. Some parents drop their kids off at school sometimes. Some pick them up. Some are nearby in the neighborhood. Some might have the type of flexible work schedules where especially if they're government workers, they might be home once a week if they're on one of those alternative work schedules. Whatever the thing is, the school teacher and the others often know those situations. So all of these things are at their disposal. And the thing is, the teachers on the ground, the professionals who do this, weren't aware of that flexibility. So when their school system said you must mail it weeks in advance so we have no risk of missing the deadline, teachers weren't aware of that. So we're requiring that technical assistance to be made more clear that those options exist. And speaking to some special educators Monday night, when I said that, they were all nodding their heads. They know which students would bring it home. They know which parents drop by the school or volunteer or do whatever else. On another piece, we mentioned the material having to be accessible. And what we were specifically referring to at the time was to make sure that material, for example, and after we just heard up here at the table, that it was accessible to blind parents who might have to read that information. So I think in that case we're really reiterating a federal law. And lastly, we had said at the time that this 5 days wouldn't have to be met if there were extenuating circumstances. And extenuating wasn't defined by us in the legislature, and the technical assistance provided to teachers said, the legislature didn't define it, we're not quite sure what it means. And what we were referring to at the time is, for example, you yourself are in the hospital, your family member is in the hospital, you're visiting them, you're at your uncle's funeral in California. There was an anecdote of someone saying they got a text message or a phone call, I need this in 4 hours. Leave that funeral and send us that information. That's a little bit ridiculous, I think most people would agree. So what we would say was necessary is to say, send that package of information 5 days in advance and explain the piece from this one individual will be coming 2 days later due to extenuating circumstances. Parents always have the right with IEP meetings to cancel and reschedule. But it's also true that a parent might say, oh, I'm in constant contact with the speech therapist. That's coming 2 days later? I can wait. That's fine. I'm still fine and ready for the meeting. So I think it leaves that flexibility. I think part of what you might hear today from the people sitting behind me and some others who have written in, a lot of discussion about problems with the IEP process in general. And I think all of the complaints are valid. Not all of the things mentioned are directly relevant to this bill, but I do think it highlights issues that we as legislators should be looking at in the future if there's other ways that we can help make this process easier. I also think that what's made clear and what I've learned through all this process, and I assume that the people behind me would agree, is that there's an incredible understaffing in our schools of pupil personnel workers, speech therapists, school psychologists. They often serve multiple schools. And I think that there would be no doubt that if we had more of these professionals, there would be more opportunities for better service. There would be less of burden of the different paperwork. So I think hearing how many schools a particular professional is assigned to certainly makes it clear how difficult it is. So in the end, for all the talk, I'll provide the amendments. We're just defining the delivery methods, defining extenuating circumstances, and making it clear what accessible means. And I hope that this finds a balance in making life easier for our school professionals without adding any added burden to parents who don't want to lose their time and opportunity to review these documents. Thank you.
Delegate Howard.
Thank you very much, and thank you for trying to make the process easier for the parents and the teachers. What I want to know, if you have the option of emailing the IEP information, can a parent request not to have this information emailed and receive it in other ways?
Well, part of what we're suggesting is that it would be part of what the schools and the parents agree to together is the best method that they can have. So for the parents who don't have email or the parents who don't want it to be emailed for whatever reason, they could still have it mailed to them. But it may be they live close enough to the school that they're willing to drop by, or they happen to carpool and they're the ones who drop the kids off every Thursday morning and they can just drop in and pick something up. So, I mean, part of that is the conversation and making sure they get together. Some have suggested maybe there's like an opt-in or opt-out procedure at the beginning of the school year. How would you like to receive these things? And that's a possibility as well. And I would add, one of our colleagues in the legislature approached me and said, "You mean they could have been emailing it to me all this time?" He was saying that he got a 50-page document that he had to drive to Kinko's, make copies of, to then drive to the advocate helping them, and how nice it would have been to have just forwarded that email on to the person helping them out.
Yeah, I think this is good. I am just concerned about the parents who can't drive by
Oh,
and pick it up,
Delegate Howard,
don't have, and they've told me in the past that, well, they can go to the library or they can do this. They can't get anywhere. And I just wanted to have an option.
Well, that's why it could always still be mailed, but in those situations that someone has email, wants email, or someone who for any reason is close enough to the school or drives to or from at any point. So we're not saying it has to be those things. Mail may still be the best option for half of the parents out there.
And I'm not sure, but I just want to have that kind of option if they say that.
That's what the language says, that it can be under any delivery method that the school and parents agree to.
Okay, and another question that might not be directly related to what you're trying to do. In the past, when you have parents who come for the conference with the IEP, you can have 10 school personnel sitting around a table, and you have this one little parent, and they have said to me that they feel intimidated. Is that still occurring?
Of course. I mean, that's part of the process, that the parent is coming in, and they, I believe, can have the advocate or lawyer with them. It could be both parents in some cases, but it is all of those professionals. It could be 6 to 10 other people, and it's partly because they each have different responsibilities, and there is no question that this process is incredibly intimidating. And part of the rationale for the 5-day rule from 2 years ago was to at least arm the parents with not just time, but the opportunity to really understand what's in front of them.
Yes, and it is intimidating, and I hope that's one of your future bills that you can bring before us, so we won't have this.
Well, I would love some recommendations there. I'm not sure how to make it less intimidating, unfortunately.
Yes, I have some recommendations for you. Thank you.
Just to quickly draw attention to a couple things and see in conversations you've had about amendments whether this has come up. One is in the law is written right now, but says that you have to send any document that the team plans to discuss at the meeting, and there's been a concern, questions about implementation. If there is a document that comes up, for example, I have a kid who got a referral in between when the documents were sent out and when the meeting takes place. Am I, as a teacher, allowed to present that to the parent? Is that inappropriate to present it because it wasn't sent out? Do we have to reschedule the meeting? Do your amendments speak to that, or have there been discussions?
My amendments do not. I think that's an excellent point to raise. I'm not sure if the best solution is to reschedule or to immediately call the parents, which the good professionals tell me is the best practice anyway in a lot of this process. But I think the people behind us might have a good answer for that about what would be most appropriate in that situation.
Okay, and to clarify, following up on the last questions, the reality is that we have a system now where if you are wealthy enough, you can often afford an advocate or a lawyer to come in with you. But do you think that then we're almost by default creating a process that disadvantages people of lower socioeconomic status who may not be able to afford that lawyer or that advocate? Are you concerned that those folks are not necessarily getting the same level of service?
I think we should all be concerned about that. And I think, in following what Delegate Howard said, that's one more thing we could be doing, not just staffing these positions better that deal with special education students, but providing that type of advocate who could help people. I think that's a great idea.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, good delegate. I had a question
Thank you.
here. I got a lot of emails from people who were concerned. They want more time rather than less time to get this done. And I'm just reading part of the bill here. It says documents must be provided at least 5 calendar days prior to a scheduled meeting of the IEP team rather than 5 business days. Now, 5 business days would give them more time
Delegate Glass, I'm not...
versus 5 calendar days. I guess I just wanted to, could you just comment on that?
Yes, I've already amended that. That's we're going back to the original language on that piece,
Okay.
and that's what I was suggesting before. We're only, in reference to the old law, we're only changing the technical assistance and these definitions.
Okay, I apologize. I came in just a
No
few minutes
problem.
late. Thank you.
No, I was trying to address that at the beginning because I know that people have been getting lots of mail on this, or up to 2 weeks ago they were.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate Kaiser, there is nothing preventing a parent from bringing, i.e., their political representative. I know a lawyer has been mentioned. There's nothing preventing an elected rep from attending with the parent's permission. Am I correct?
Delegate Sukes, I'm not aware of that, but maybe council would know, or that's something we can get back to you on. Apparently, Delegate Ivey knows.
Before, always at the parent's request, but as long as you're invited, they're usually delighted to have the support.
Okay, so I guess you knew the answer. Okay.
Comes under never ask a question unless you know the answer, isn't it? All right. Thank you very much. What, you had a question, Turner?
Yes, Delegate Turner?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you one little question. I have this. Has all this been worked out with the Maryland Developmental Disability Council?
Do you mean the Maryland Disability Law Center? Because I think you can...
No, that's the council.
The council. I believe they're here to testify. You can ask them.
Right, because
every group that had contacted me, we had sent a letter to 2 Mondays ago describing that we were not going back on the days and we were just doing the holiday piece. They didn't necessarily know the newest iterations because it's been in constant motion these last couple of weeks. But I think you can ask them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Joshua Rubin.
Good evening, Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee. My name is Joshua Rubin. I am proud and privileged to be a teacher of students with intellectual and developmental disabilities in a high school in Montgomery County. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, Delegate Kaiser's taken a little bit of the air out of my presentation, because she's basically suggested that a lot of the changes that I was hoping to talk about are going to now be included. So I'm going to skip over that part of my testimony. But I do want to request that the committee consider the fact that there are some local education agencies, some LEAs in the state of Maryland who, in spite of the clarification from the technical assistance, Delegate Kaiser, that you're talking about writing, there are some LEAs that will still decide to make some sort of a default. And if that is, in fact, the mail, as it is in numerous localities around the state, we're talking upwards of tens of thousands of dollars worth of costs to taxpayers. So I just request that there be language included that in some way indicates that the parents, in consultation with the school, come up with the best way for the documents to be delivered, and that there should be no automatic default to use the mail service, simply because Montgomery County, just as an example, I came with far too many facts and figures in my head not to come up with a few of them right now. Montgomery County has 47,000 students who receive IEP services at present. And if you're talking roughly $2 a piece to mail, which right now is Montgomery County's default, we're talking a significant amount of money, not to mention the amount of money that's wasted on paper, ink, and the like. So I would just request that if we're going to do this the way that Delegate Kaiser has laid out, and thank you very much for doing it this way, I just request that technical assistance say that we're not going to have any sort of default that's going to be an added cost, monetary cost to the local school systems.
Thank you. Delegate Lukey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just remind me, what school do you teach at again?
Einstein High School.
And so you've got a lot of students whose parents are not native speakers of English and may not speak English at all.
That's correct.
Can you ask me, I honestly don't know the answer to this, because Delegate Kaiser was bringing up earlier the question of accessibility for people who are visually impaired. Do we, when we send out these packets of information, do we translate them for people if they're not able to speak English?
No, absolutely not. And that has actually posed a significant challenge for a number of educators around the state, especially in Montgomery County, where our immigrant ELL English language learning population is growing at a fairly steady rate, especially in some parts of the county,
right.
Including the Kensington area, which is where my school is located. We have had parents get extremely concerned at the receipt of 50-plus page documents in the mail from the school that they cannot read. There is no accessibility aspect to the law as it currently stands. I would like to see something like that. That would be spectacular. But at the same time, the cost and the amount of time that it would take, I think, might be prohibitive right now, given current budget constraints, at least in Montgomery County.
Thank you very much.
I certainly hope we don't add anything about cost to what is being presented.
It's not my intention to.
Education is for everyone, not just in one jurisdiction. And the cost of a child with a disability or with an IEP, naturally you are going to pay more for that type of individual than a person with no problems. There are a lot of reasons for that. So I certainly hope she does not add that to her bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Maloney on behalf of the Maryland State Education Association. We're very happy to hear Delegate Kaiser's testimony. I would have preferred to have heard it around 2 or 3 today, but nevertheless, very happy to hear the changes that are being made to the bill. We've heard ever since the bill passed in 2010, MSDA has heard about the 5-day rule, the 5-day rule, the 5-day rule again and again from our educators, and the difficulties they're having implementing the law in their counties. You all probably recently received a lot of emails. We sent some information about Delegate Kaiser's bill, and according to our records, within a week there were about 2,000 educators sent an email to you or your colleagues. So this is definitely an issue that they are aware of and that they want to see a solution or fixed or some common sense brought to the table. As Delegate Kaiser said, it's being interpreted differently across the counties, and even principal to principal we're hearing it's being interpreted differently, and basically the school boards are always worried to open themselves up to any kind of liability when it comes to this kind of issue. So we're very happy to hear about some common sense solutions, and are willing to work with Delegate Kaiser and the committee to make those happen. Thank you.
Sure. Oh my gosh, my student, thank you for having me, good people. You are amazing what you do here, staying here all this day. I teach the most severely handicapped kids. You know, they're alternate MSA kids. Their IQs are 69 and below. I believe in no child left inside, especially after hearing some of the testimonies today. I love to take field trips. I've taken my students in their wheelchairs to the Smith Island Karen Noonan Center. We are dedicated to the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. We're planning on going out on the Stanley Norman in the spring. We helped reforest the Antietam battlefield. I'm at Boonesboro, you know, so Nora Roberts has one of my students working at the Fitness Inn. If you can read her new book, you'll learn all about Boonesboro. The kids are really good, and they love adventures. And what it comes around to is I love to provide those adventures, and it takes a lot of paperwork to do that really good stuff. We give an alternate MSA test, which takes 8 months. Excuse me, I'm a little nervous. It takes 8 months to give this test. And, man, your whole focus is on that test, but you still have to get the black banana out of Josh's backpack and show him how to wash out his backpack and use the new washer they got in our classroom. And you still have to be sure everybody's listening to their behavior intervention plan, but you still have to get annual yearly progress. And on the annual yearly progress, what happens with our kids, if they're 17 to 21, they can detract from the school's annual yearly progress. So we have to be mindful of that going on. That's not fair. That's not what IDEA is supposed to do. And we also have to be sure that the stickers are on the portfolios that we create correctly, because that will make the test not scoreable if I put the sticker on wrong. And if I use whiteout, that could be a crime too. It's like, whoa. It's all these little details I have to pay attention to. And then there's the 12 kids in my room, in their wheelchairs, in their walkers, you know, in their needy little ways that need my attention. They need my reading to them, reading with them, getting them on their internet programs and all of that. It takes about 90 minutes to create a decent individualized educational plan. It takes about 90 minutes to give a Woodcock-Johnson, which is a very good test that's a teaching tool. It's normed and it's standardized. And you put all that together and you want to be sure that, you know, your 30 days, your 60 days, your 90 days, and their calendar days. It adds confusion if you would have to go back and say, oh, wait, was that a business day or a calendar day? There's so many details in my job that I just want to be attentive to each and every one. So I think that this is a good compromise. It keeps things in a row. It keeps the ducks in a row for the special ed teacher. My favorite field trip one year had the kids doing one of those walking tours around Annapolis. We brought him down from Washington County. The guy's in his costume taking us all around. We're sitting out in the courtyard at the Naval Academy, and the guy's telling the kids, oh, we call these yard dogs, and they're squirrels. So one of the boys raises his hand. He goes, well, can you still eat them? And the guy's like, oh, my God, squirrels. And it's like, I turn to the kid, I'm there, yeah, Joey, you can still have squirrel pot pie. So it's all about perspectives, you know, and you have to look at what are the teachers able to do and the time with which they have to do it. You know, you have to, you know, the guide's perspective was like, ew, and the kid was like, man, it's squirrel pot pie. So those are the things I ask you to look at when you're thinking about special ed. And our meetings, it's like, man, I hope that people could do the good work of working in harmony to be a really good team with these kids. Because when we have teams that click making IEPs, it's a beautiful thing. The parents go on the trips with us to Smith Island, too. We make a team. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bill Fluke. I'm here for the Maryland School Psychologists Association, but I am a supervisor for school psychologists in Baltimore County. I want to thank, first of all, Chairman Hickson, Vice Chairman Rosenberg, the Ways and Means Committee. Thank you for this opportunity. Particularly, thank you, Delegate Kaiser. You've listened to the concerns. There were some unintended consequences to this bill as it was implemented, and it's been implemented differently in every school system, as far as I can tell. Baltimore County, we have to mail them. Other places are doing it differently. But we are absolutely committed, and from the start, we came and testified in favor of this bill. We absolutely believe that parents need to be full partners in their child's school. And Delegate Howard, your point about how intimidating that IEP team is absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. We tried to not have it that way. Having access to the documents ahead of time maybe takes a little of that anxiety away. I think it's a good idea. It's important for the partnership across the board for all problem solving in school, particularly for IEP teams. Best practice is for the psychologist to meet with the parent before the meeting, go over the findings of the assessment report. That can't always happen, and I'll give you some information. You have a letter that we submitted a little while ago, which basically is responding to the original bill. We thought it was a good idea to go back from 5 business to 5 calendar. There are other solutions, obviously, but I want to take this opportunity to tell you a little bit about what school psychologists do and talk a little bit about some of the impact. So we help schools to develop behavior support plans for students who are struggling with challenging behavior. We work with teachers to support students who are struggling to learn to read. We work with a school counselor to develop school-wide ways to deal with bullying. We work with the principal when a student makes a threat, figure out what to do. We work with parents to improve communication and understanding. We talk with students who are dealing with feelings of depression. We do this for all kids. This is not part of the IEP process, although we do it for students with IEPs as well. We are among the many things that we do for kids and for their families and for our schools, we conduct psychological assessments. We're often doing these as part of an IEP team evaluation. We're members of those teams. We conduct these assessments when the IEP team needs information. We suspect the child has a disability, or they're not making progress, or for some other reason, let's take a look at what's going on from a psychological perspective. I will say part of my job is to supervise folks. I've got 2 early career school psychologists. They're second year with Baltimore County. One of them doctorally trained at the University of Maryland, outstanding young woman, lots to offer. And this is not due to this bill, but you should be aware she has been asked as of yesterday to conduct 74 psychological assessments. She has 2 schools. So every day or 2 that is cut off from the amount of time she has to do that work gives her less flexibility to do all those other things I just mentioned. I have another school psychologist, second year with us from Bowie State University, an outstanding young man who I sat in on the meeting because I was observing him as part of his evaluation. This was a 4-year-old child, the initial evaluation, and the finding was that the child had a disorder on the autism spectrum. My psychologist spent probably 20 hours after the initial team where they talked about planning this evaluation, spent 20 hours on this assessment, collecting information from home, from school, observing the child, doing testing, all the ways that we collect information, 20 hours on one assessment. Now, I want to say that I'm very happy that we're talking about some more flexibility here, and we're very interested in working with Delegate Kaiser and the subcommittee as this moves forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you all very much. The opponents, Lauren Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee. I actually, at this point, should be included with the proponents because we are in 100% full agreement with Delegate Kaiser's plan going forward. I'm Lauren Callens, for the record. I'm a staff attorney in the Education Unit at the Maryland Disability Law Center, and we absolutely would be willing to work with Delegate Kaiser and the subcommittee and MSDE in providing clarification to make this process, which is incredibly complicated, even for the lawyers that practice in this area. It's a very complex process, and anything we can do to facilitate that for parents and for school systems, we're behind it and happy to work. I just wanted to address for 30 seconds some of the comments that some of you have raised. Delegate Howard, first of all, we would 100% support a bill that would make the process less intimidating, and we have some suggestions if you're interested one day. Delegate Lutke, you asked about families who can't afford a lawyer, and I would argue that this bill more impacts them than those who are wealthy enough to afford counsel, because those who have counsel could walk into that meeting prior to 2 years ago without having read any of those documents, but have a savvy lawyer to say, we need to reschedule, we didn't have a chance to review the documents. Those who didn't know any differently went in and were sandbagged, not intentionally, but just there was no opportunity to get help. And so that you know, our office provides free counsel, and when in certain cases and cases that we can't take that are not covered by our grants, we have a pro bono program. There are other providers like us that provide support to families who can't afford counsel, and we'd be happy to share that information. Regarding your comment, Delegate Lukey, about a referral that might come in within the 5 days, it absolutely, in terms of efficiency and people being around the table, all of them, however many it might be, and it has been 15 in some of our meetings, I think it's good practice to contact the lawyer, if there is one, and the parent right away, so that you don't have to reschedule another meeting, get the information out so that can all be discussed at the meeting and not get hung up in the deadlines. That said, a parent should have an opportunity to review it, so I would hate for an important decision to be made based on information that the parent didn't have until the day of the meeting. And Delegate Turner, yes, we are in agreement, and we are aware now of Delegate Kaiser's plan. And I just want to thank you as I conclude, Delegate Kaiser. I know you've been inundated with a lot of perspectives from lots of parents, and I so appreciate your willingness to be flexible and to rethink and to do what is best, in your view, to help make this process better. And I appreciate that very much, and thank you on behalf of all the clients we represent. Thank you. Oh, Rachel from the DD Council was not able to stay.
Okay, fine. That concludes the hearing on House Bill 596. Members of the committee, please turn to House Bill 745, Delegate Serafini.